Hello, my name is Zach Chakan, IRB Administrator for the University of Buffalo IRB, and this is using the UBIRB as the IRB of record for multi-site research. This presentation has been approved by the UBIRB and is part of the University of Buffalo's Clinical and Translational Science Institute's educational series. The topics I'll tackle today include the researcher responsibilities when getting a reliance agreement set up for one of these types of studies, the UBIRB and the remote sites IRB's responsibilities, steps taken by the UBIRB and the remote sites throughout the process, and the local principal investigator's responsibilities throughout the reliance on the UBIRB. The first topic today will be the researcher responsibilities to begin the reliance agreement on the UBIRB for multi-site research. The UBIRB recommends that if you have a study that you plan the UBIRB to be the relying IRB for multiple sites, that you always notify our director, Rich Corrales, by email at corrales@buffalo.edu of the study and how many sites you plan to include, with the IRB investigator being the primary investigator for the study. One thing to note is that even if you do reach out to Rich, if the study normally would require going through central study registration, it will have to for a multi-site study as well. In order to simplify the review and the process as best as we can, IRB approval must come through for the main study site here at UB before adding on the other sites. For your click submission in the IRB portal, we would want you to submit your HRP-103 protocol document describing the procedures that will take place in the study and overall which sites they will occur. This will serve as the master protocol for the entire study. At that point, for your initial study, we would also ask you to submit all materials needed to conduct the research taking place locally at UB. This would be the same as any other type of research study that would normally occur. Once the study has been submitted to CLIC for the UBIRB, there are other things that will also take place behind the scenes that you may not realize. While this is all going on, the UBIRB will work to obtain reliance agreements from the other remote sites. But the remote sites PI will also have some other responsibilities as well. That PI must reach out to their IRB to ask if they are willing to cede review to the UBIRB, and then their IRB will have to contact the UBIRB, including Rich, to execute the reliance agreement and get all of that set up. When that's going on, the remote sites can prepare their specific site protocol documents, which in the CLIC library is the HRP-508 site-specific protocol. After the UBIRB approves the main study, the UBPI will have to submit a modification to add all the other sites. This could happen in separate modifications, or it could happen all in one with each site if all of the documents are ready. However, we would need all of the following documents and materials to make sure that we can approve the modification. The primary document will need to be a signed reliance agreement that is signed both by UB and the remote IRB representative. As mentioned in the last slide, the site-specific HRP-508 protocol will have to be completed and uploaded that will help detail what is going on in that other remote site, that especially if it is something different than what is happening here at UB. We would ask for what is called a local context document a lot of times to make sure that we know if there are any specific laws, regulations, organizational policies, site-specific injury language, etc., that is required so that we can approve all research procedures that take place at that remote site. Sometimes we would still need to do a local legal review of those procedures, especially if children or cognitively impaired adults who cannot consent for themselves and need a legally authorized representative, would be enrolled in those states. While the remote IRB is executing the reliance agreement with UBIRB, the remote institution would have to inform UB of these specific regulations, which really would help out in the review process and help reduce any significant delays that could result. Another document that's in the CLIC library is the HRP-101 Human Subjects Training and COI Certification document for external sites that will need to be signed as well by the remote IRB representative to make sure that their requirements are completed. We would also ask that any other remote site-specific documents or materials would be sent as part of that modification. One thing to note is that you may be familiar with the study team members page in CLIC that asks for external team members, and there is a special external team members document that you could upload. That would not be used in this specific situation unless there is no IRB at the relying institution, and there would then be no HRP-901 document for another IRB to fill out. If you have any further questions about this, you can always contact the UBIRB. There are two specific instances when the UBIRB cannot serve as the IRB of record on multi-site research. The first is research that is determined to be exempt. The remote institutions must review and make that determination for their own site. The other case would be for institutions that are located in other countries, as the UBIRB does not have the expertise or knowledge in international regulations to take on that responsibility. If you have questions about this, you may contact the UBIRB. Now we'll briefly talk about the UBIRB and the remote site IRB's responsibilities throughout this process. The UBIRB will verify that all researchers at UB have their city training up to date and maintained throughout the course of the study. However, it will be the remote sites IRB's responsibility to verify that their researchers' training is up to date and maintained. The remote IRB will have to share this info with the UBIRB, likely through that HRP-901 document. Modifications can be submitted throughout to update that document, and we would still want that signed by the remote IRB's representative. Each site's IRB will also verify that their conflict of interest requirements are complete as well. If there are any conflict of interest management plans that are taking place at a remote site, we would ask that those be passed along to the UBIRB. Here are a couple steps that both the UBIRB and the remote sites IRB must take throughout the process. At the onset, there are a few steps that the UBIRB and remote sites IRB must take to make sure that a reliance agreement is fully executed. A fully executed reliance agreement means that it was signed by both the institutional representatives from Buffalo and the remote sites IRB. The reliance agreement does lay out the responsibilities of each institution's IRB during the research. There is a popular reliance agreement called the SMART IRB Reliance Agreement that is used throughout the country. If the remote site is part of the SMART IRB system, the local PI can initiate a request for reliance using that system specifically. One important thing to note is that remote sites cannot begin any procedures until the UBIRB modification letter that adds the site as part of the study is approved and delivered. There are a few responsibilities that the local PI will have to maintain throughout their reliance on the UBIRB as part of this type of study. These are very similar to regular studies, but they could take on a little bit more work whenever you have the remote sites to manage as well. Just like with any single site study, once the main study is approved, you would have to keep the study up to date with the UBIRB through the CLIC system. All study modifications for any sites will have to be submitted by the local PI, as remote site PIs or researchers will not have access to the UB system. So coordinators or PIs here at UB will have to submit anything to update their study. If there is any reportable new information, such as serious adverse events or reports or harm done to any participants, those will have to be submitted as an R&I for any sites to the UBIRB and will be reviewed appropriately. To maintain continuing review, the local PI will have to submit their continuing review for all sites through the MOD-CR process in the Click IRB, just like they would normally for their own study. You will not need to do different continuing reviews for each specific site, but one continuing review for the overall study as a whole. Some additional helpful resources can be found on the Click library, and the link for Click is shown at the bottom of this slide. The policy document can be very helpful if you would like to read it step by step, and that is the HRP-103 document, and it is titled The Utilization of UB as the IRB of Record on a Multi-Site Study. This is found in the Standard Operating Procedures tab of the Click library. The General tab also has the HRP-103 Investigator Manual. The HRP-901 document, where you would find the COI and City Training certification for a multi-site study, can also be found in the library. Thank you for your time and attention during this presentation. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact Val Bailoni at the UBIRB phone number, which is 716-888-4888, or ub-irb@buffalo.edu. You can also contact me at 716-888-4874, or znchakan@buffalo.edu. The CTSI Clinical Research Facilitators, Marchelle Brooks and Alexis O'Brien, can help out as well, and their phone number is 716-829-4357.